Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 824, and today's date is November 21st, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Puerto Rico, we understand Puerto Rico is defaulting. I mean, we're looking at Ukraine. Ukraine is defaulting. This is why they want Russia to take 20% off the debt. Greece basically is collapsing, even though they're continually piling on more and more debt. And we see Puerto Rico right now, where they don't have enough revenue coming in. The creditors right now, they're very resistant to cutting any of their debt whatsoever. They want Puerto Rico to pay in full. There's another $303 million, which comes due 1 month later on January. And the Commonwealth warns it is facing a liquidity crisis set to run out of cash this month, and revenues that are coming in right now are much, much lower than expected. The debt is way too high, and everything needs to be restructured. Basically, the economy is collapsing there. And they're worried because Puerto Rico might not have the ability to raise enough revenue to pay for health care, retiree costs, essential government services, and everything else. And what might happen is we might see public unrest in Puerto Rico because of all this. Because you know what happens when payments discontinue? People get very, very upset. And they go right to the government and say, what is going on here? And we might see this. And as more and more businesses close down, as more and more people struggle, this is what happens when collapse hits. And we will see this throughout the United States. Once everything starts to fall apart, it's going to be like Cyprus. It's going to be like Greece. It's going to be like Puerto Rico. But it's going to be much, much worse because once it hits the United States, everything just falls apart. And the central bankers know this. Now, the central bankers, the Fed, they're holding an expedited closed meeting on Monday. Now, what is this meeting? We don't know. There's a couple things going on here. We understand the statistical illusionary numbers that the government is continually putting out. We know they're fake. We know this is not really how the economy is doing because we've been looking at all the real economic indicators. Right now, the Baltic Dry Index, basically, it's on a free-for-all in a downward trend that is crashing. And what we're seeing right now is basically manufacturing heading down the same path, retail heading down the same path, housing right now, the bubble's ready to pop, and there are more and more layoffs coming down the road. Now, we understand Congress has basically introduced legislation where they want to audit the Fed. The Fed also realizes that the economy cannot be sustained. And the question is, what is going on right now in the Fed? Are they talking about interest rates, or are they talking about something about maybe we should bring down the economy and set up the time frame of when it will come down? Because we know as the economy falls apart and accelerates, they want to be in control when they bring it down. And this is why they're getting prepared and ready to blame it on another group or another country. Now, NSA docs that were released from the Freedom of Information Act, and this is reported in the New York Times, basically what they're saying is that although the U.S. government says an NSA program which collected email records of Americans was shut down in 2011, guess what? They really didn't shut it down. They kept on collecting. And we know the government, no matter what they're telling us through lip service, they're actually doing the opposite in the background. Basically, what they did is they used fiber optic internet cables outside the U.S. to collect the domestic email data. And they can say, well, we're outside the U.S. And this is how they're spinning everything. And they will never, ever stop spying on the people. Now, a watchdog group says about 80% of the Army contracts are complete duplicate of government services. There's so much waste right now, it's unbelievable. They said contracts were for services already being provided by the government. The Navy and other agencies reported about 13% in contract services duplication, and this is coming from the Government Accountability Office. So we can see, and we know right now, is money is just being pushed all over the place. Of course, it's not going to the people. It's going to the government, the industrial war complex. We understand that many of the elite are collecting. What they're doing is everyone's scrambling for their piece before this whole entire system comes down, because nobody wants to be holding paper. So what they're doing is they're collecting the paper and buying real assets with it right now. So they are covered. Out in Mali, we understand there was a terrorist attack out in Mali. And right now, the United States has condemned, of course, the terrorist attack. We just happen to have troops right there ready to go. Coincidence? I think not. And the United States is prepared to assist the Malian government in the coming days, whatever they need. And why are they in Mali? Well, we understand that Mali has the third highest gold production in Africa. And recently, there was a new strain of gold discovered in Mali. I wonder why they want to be in this area. We know France is already here. And it's amazing that the United States is saying, okay, let's get into this area also, because they know they need more and more of this gold. Now, the European governments, they're holding secret meetings, and basically they're going to be talking about dismantling the borderless travel, the Schengen. They're looking to dismantle it completely. Now, what's happening in these meetings, we don't know exactly what it's going to be. But what they are saying is the current system is simply not working. And it looks like they will be setting up geographical blocks. And it looks like many of these refugees, which most of them are not Syrian, will not be allowed into these countries. And this is all part of the plan to create as much chaos and to put the European nations against each other and try to convince them they should all get together and go into Syria. And this is what we're seeing right now, that this might be the trigger point of where everything is going to occur in Syria. They want all the European nations involved. They want China. They want Russia, the United States. And we see everything is being concentrated in this one area right now. Now, there is a U.S. Congresswoman who introduced a bill to stop the illegal war on Assad. This is U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. And she calls on Washington and their effort to oust Assad counterproductive and illegal, before taking it a step further and accusing the CIA of arming the very same terrorists who the White House insists are sworn enemies. Now, she better watch her back at this point, because she's calling them out. Now, everything she says isn't exactly right, but she's very, very close, and this is most likely making a lot of the government employees very, very nervous that she's coming out and saying this. And she introduced this legislation to end the illegal war. And she says the U.S. is waging two different wars. One against the Islamic State, which is part of the CIA, which the U.S. is backing. So it's really not a war. And the other one is against Assad. And the one against Assad is completely illegal. And it's completely illegal to overthrow the Syrian government. And she wants this stopped. Now, every single American should be standing up going, why are we even in Syria in the first place? Why did we invade a sovereign country? And if we're truly, truly going after terrorism in that country, why aren't we working with the government? Why is the government more interested in removing Assad than going after the Islamic State? And we know the answer to that. Because their whole goal was always to get Assad. The Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government and the coalition forces. And they created them, they funded them, and right now Russia is destroying them. And because Russia is destroying them, the United States, the coalition forces, are backed into a corner. Pretty soon, there will be no more terrorism in Syria the way Russia and Syria are going. And the U.S. knows this, and they're running out of time. So we're seeing all of these threats now. Belgium right now. They're saying there's a terror threat in Brussels. Everyone is being warned to avoid crowded areas. I mean, the fear factor is like way above 10 right now. They are just making everyone believe you should be afraid all the time. And this is part of the false flag event. They want to take away the rights. They want to make people scared. They want to make people pointing fingers at each other. And basically, Belgium looks like a war zone. And they have basically military soldiers, barricades all over the place. Belgium's capital is on security lockdown. The U.S. Embassy in Brussels is calling on Americans to stay indoors. And will something happen? We will have to wait and see. But they're looking at this very, very carefully because of the threats. Now, Anonymous has come out, and they've published a list of the Islamic State targets for Sunday attacks. Now, the list is from all different parts of the world. There are some places in Paris, some in Indonesia, Milan, Lebanon, and here in the United States, which is the Phillips Arena in Atlanta, where the WWE Survivor Series is going on. And they're saying they are under threat of attack this Sunday. Now, of course, the FBI, DHS, and all the other agencies have no information about this whatsoever because, as we know, most of these events are ginned up by them. So they're looking into this, and they're going to believe Anonymous that they actually got this information. To me, it's kind of sketchy. Because the FBI, if we believe the official story, continually tells us that it's getting more and more difficult for them to find the terrorists because of encryption. But Anonymous has the ability to find a list of all the terrorist attacks? I mean, something just doesn't make sense here. And of course, Anonymous is out there trying to convince everyone that we hope that this thwarts the plans of the Islamic State. Now, will something happen on Sunday? We'll have to wait and see. But the FBI and all the other agencies are out there. Do I think this is going to be some type of an event? I'm not too sure at this point because I'm not really believing Anonymous. I think they're just looking for publicity at this point, and I think they're just throwing out all this information. But again, we will have to wait and see, and we'll have to see what occurs this Sunday. At this point, I think what they're really doing is keeping the fear factor as high as they possibly can, keeping it around the world until they basically create the event they really want. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.